Hello and welcome back. My name is Jesse Perez, aka DJ Dark X. This is actually take two, a remake, or rather, um, I'm redoing this guide for Pixel Game Maker MV on how to do a day to night cycle to fix a few issues that I had with the first video, and along with the fact that I didn't actually explain how any of it was actually done with the instant change, clock change, and everything. That's especially when it comes to going to the night transition, what to look for. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, let's since this is basically replacing the old video, let me do an introduction of this. What this system is going to do is essentially it allows you to implement a day to night system that goes right back to the daytime, and it does it gradually. What you need for this is three different objects. First is the day to night clock, although technically you don't need this, or you do rather, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to actually display. You can be invisible if you want it to be. But if not, you can actually have it display the actual time through a show text action. The time of day object itself, which is going to be tracked using the day to night clock, which also works with the global variable of time, which you can name it to whatever you want, but make sure that there is a global variable that you are working with. I set it to 5 o'clock in the morning. You can put it at whatever you want. Um, Make sure that the number is not above 23, though. If it goes up to 24 and higher, it's not going to work. We're using a 24-hour clock, like military time. So, right, this works in tandem with it, and then there's the instant time change. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Instant time change, which allows you to be able to change what time of day it is instantly when you go to a new scene in order to make sure that it actually coincides with the actual current time of day. Um, I'll explain what I'm talking about here in a second. First, let's see how it works. Right now, I have it set at 5 a.m. in the morning. As you can see, there's a light blue color coming out of these windows. That's actually showing the time of day. I made them transparent so that this way you can actually see what time of day it is. But let's go ahead and go outside and you get a better look of it. So right now it's still 7 a.m. As soon as it gets to 10 p.m., or 10 a.m., I'm sorry. As soon as it gets to 10 a.m., it's going to move from early morning to actual like daylight. So here's it's 8 o'clock. There's 10 seconds between each hour. In my last preview, or in my last video, it was 5 seconds between each one, and the transition took 2 seconds. Okay, so as soon as it hits 10 o'clock, you'll see that it starts to fade in color. You see that? There we go. Takes 4 seconds to do the duration. Oh, not sure what happened there. For some reason, it just kept on going. But as you can see, it did in fact change. Now, if I were to go back into my home, look at the windows, perfect. Go back out. I had to change the amount of time it takes for fading in and out of that one. But let's say we also want to go over to the next one. There it is. This one's already a fully set up scene. Obviously, I'm reworking the previous one. Okay, so when it goes to 15, it will change to an afternoon color, like a yellowish greenish color. Like a late afternoon, because it's essentially 3 o'clock. That's the best way you can figure out military time 24-hour clock is once you get to 13, just subtract 12 from that number, and you'll have your time. So if it's 13, minus 12 is 1, and so on and so forth. So 17, it's 5 o'clock. So it changes to orange. Then at 19 is going to change to sunset. It's going to change to a red color. You can see it's changing slowly. Going back to the previous scene, it's still there. Looks like my objects weren't working properly. As soon as it gets to 21, it'll be nighttime. And there it is, slowly transitioning to nighttime. So, as you can see, it does work. If I were to go back inside, there it is. It still keeps the color of the time of day. So, okay, how do we get this to work? As I said, you've got three objects. I'm sorry for constantly having to clear my throat. For some reason, I decided to just kind of give it on me right now. However, if you can deal with that, then first let's design the day to night clock. Processing here. This is obviously going to be the default, and it's always showing the text. Now, again, you don't have to show text. It can be an invisible clock. That way you know what's going on, you know what time of day it is, but the player doesn't technically know, or they can be told by an NPC or whatever. I had to recommend this with side view games more so than or more so than top down, but you can do with top down as well. But essentially, what you're going to do is this is going to be processing. It's going to always stay here until something happens. So right here it says change if any condition is met, switch variable changes. Basically, it's always checking right here if the common or global value of time is less than 23. Okay, keep that in mind. Basically, as long as the number is less than 23 hours, which is 11 o'clock, then it will add 1. But then how come, it's like, how do we keep it from adding 1 every frame? Or every second? Well, actually every frame. So this way it doesn't just quickly cycle through everything really wildly. Here's what we're going to do. Notice how we don't have an action that's leading out back to processing or whatever. I'll show you why. What you're going to do is you're going to wait 10 seconds, and then, or whatever time you want, and then add 1 to the value. Then you go back to processing. Execute object action, object self, processing, and there we go. The reason for that is because if you put in another one, and you say, and if you put in, let's say you put a new, or you put in a shortcut, right? To go back to processing, or just create a link right here. You say change unconditionally. It'll change even though this is not done processing properly. Even though it says for this runtime to wait right here 10 seconds, it won't do it. It'll automatically process, like keep doing this. It'll loop endlessly, and nothing will get done. I know this because I actually looked at it. I actually tried that, and it didn't work. So this is actually a much better way to do it. Yeah, you could actually just say after 10 seconds, but this already has the 10 seconds waiting, so just execute the action right after that and go back to processing. Plus, it kind of keeps things a little bit clean too. I'm actually going to go ahead and bring this over. Okay, now, what about if we're using this 24-hour clock though, Jesse? How exactly are we going to get it to change back to 0 once it hits 23? Aha. So here's where we're going to do a check. Make sure that all conditions are met because we have 2 of them. the switch is equal to 23 seconds, or the time, the variable is equal to 23 for time, and then it waits 10 seconds, or again, however long you want the each hour to be. Then it goes over here. You change the variable back to 0, which means this will start processing instead of this. Wait the 10 seconds, and then execute the action. Normally, you wait 10 seconds and then change it, but in this case, it's already waiting 10 seconds before it actually sets to 0. Then you set it, then you wait an extra 10 seconds, then you execute processing. Then over here, it'll go from there. Although I think, honestly, that we can probably remove that. And we should be good to go. I think I added it. So it was basically 1 o'clock was lasting 20 seconds instead of 10. So after the time passes, set it to 0. Then it'll come back over here. Once you execute action, it's the same one. It goes back to processing. You can copy paste it from here if you want. Then from here, it'll check to see if it's under 23, which it is, because it's set back to 0. Then it'll wait 10 seconds, then basically add 1 to the variable again, and you have a constantly changing clock. But this way, when you look at it here, when you do this, when it checks to see if it's equal to 23 and then it waits 10 seconds, technically you're not adding, so that way it goes to 24 and then switches back to 0. You're waiting 10 seconds and then you're setting it back to 0 manually. Again, 10 seconds being the duration of the hour, but you can change that to 8 seconds, 1 second. You can change that to a full minute if you really wanted to. But regardless of that fact, that's how to do it. So now you have your day to night clock. But what about the time of day object and the instant time change? Let's discuss the instant time change first. This one is essentially so that this way we don't have to worry about, oh, well, how are we going to make sure that the game remembers, oh wait, it's this time, so I should set this color for the background. Well, that's what this is for. Now, I didn't actually mention how this works. When you go to scenes, if you'll notice, I've got 4 main layers. One is above the player and above everything else. Then there's the main one where it has essentially all the collision tiles, enemies, and player, which I need to get rid of these and put these on the main layer, or the tiles layer. Tiles layer, which is basically stuff that you're not really interacting with at all. And the back layer, again, also just like the tiles, but one backwards, and I use this essentially for transparent stuff or stuff that's just going to be in the background. But you can also add another one. I'm not going to. But, okay. So now you've got, after that, there's 6 layers you need to worry about. Or at least for this example that I'm showing you, there's 6 layers. Morning, day, afternoon, dusk, sunset, and night. Because I want to have these times of day in my game, I need those layers. Let's say you just want to do the 2, day and night. All you would need is, well, day and night. You would only need 2 layers, 2 extra layers. And make sure they're behind everything else. You can use transparency so that this way your like all your other items like clouds and things like that, they blend in with the time of day. But you can also change them if you wanted to through tile gimmicks, where you can change the color of certain tiles to match a certain time of day, etc., etc. Either way, I'm not exactly sure how that would work. I'd have to look into it, but honestly, it doesn't really matter to me. This is a simple game. It's not supposed to be anything really complex, but I added this system, which is not that complex anyway, to actually get working. Okay, so for me, I've got morning, day, afternoon, dusk, sunset, and night. So I need the 6 layers. Okay, now the reason why I need these 6 layers is so that this way I can do um, scene effects on those layers, then delete them and disable the layer at the same. Like basically, disable the layer after it's already been changed, and then remove the effects while it's waiting for the next hour to come in. The reason why, see, this system could have been a lot simpler, but right now, Pixel Game Maker MV does not stack filter effects, or in this case, it doesn't change the hue of something of a certain layer or anything like that. It basically adds a filter effect. If it works like RPG Maker, or you could change the tone of a certain layer over and over and over again through a duration, it would work perfectly for our needs. If you don't mind them being instant, this could actually be a lot simpler. The system could be a lot simpler, but I'll bore you with that on another video. For the time being, right now, we're going to work on this. So, basically what we're doing is that with these 6 layers, we're going to go into the object, instant time change. I should have actually put early morning up here, but yeah, it's fine. It still works the same. So right here, I have it initializing. So for early morning, I put it like day, instant, afternoon, instant, etc., etc. Right here, early morning. Now what it's gonna do is it's gonna check for for basically values during these times. Make sure to do change if all conditions, not any, all conditions are met. If the time is greater than or equal to 5, but less than or equal to 9, which is the time of day for early morning. Then it basically enables all layers, so that this way layer number 5, which is where early morning is, or my morning layer is right here, it takes precedence over the other ones because it's a solid color. These are all tiles, by the way. So all you have to do is go into this layer, paint it that one color. There's your time of day color. And I'll explain again also why that is. Okay. So you just enable all the layers. You're good to go. It's already changed to that time of day, to that time of day's color. If you go to day, on the other hand, it's looking for greater than or equal to 10, but less than or equal to 14, which is 2 o'clock. So basically between 10 and 2 p.m., or 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., you disable layer 5, which is the morning layer. Same thing with this. Check the times. Disable layer 5 and 6, and 7, and 8, and 9. You're never going to actually disable layer 10 because you're just cycling right back to number 5. Besides, if you disable layer 10, you'd have nothing but a black background. So, yeah, that's not good. But here's where it becomes a little confusing. You're checking for times here and everything, right? But my nighttime starts at 21 hours, which means that it only gets up to 23, and then it switches back to 0. But my nighttime lasts until 4 a.m. How does that work? This is where we do the same thing. Change if all conditions are met, but we have an OR. So it's checking right now, greater than or equal to 0, less than or equal to 4, or if the hour is greater than or equal to 21, or less than or equal to 23. Because again, you'll never touch the hour 24. So you're always going to have a value you're always going to have the values 0 and anything up to 23. So it's going to be checking whether any of those two are correct. So, or whether each set is correct. That's why you need the OR in between the two different time sets. Believe me, I didn't do that, and it didn't work. I just put and it didn't work properly. So you need to put an OR between those two time sets. This way I can check for either the first set of time or the second set of time, and if it equals true, then it'll change it to nighttime. Otherwise, it's going to just be early morning, and it's not going to work. Okay, so now you know how to set that up. It's relatively easy. Now the thing is, here's the funny part. Notice how this has no execute object or no execute. Yeah, it doesn't have execute object action, and it has no link because it's supposed to stay here. The instant time change is not supposed to work unless like it's only supposed to work once the scene is loading or just before it's loaded. It works immediately as the scene is loading, so this way there's no kind of glitchy like, oh, it's early morning. Oh, but no, okay, now it's changed to like to sunset to red. So it goes from blue to red like as the scene is finished loading or anything. We don't want that to happen. Now the way that you can actually get this to work, and this is why I designed it this way, is when you go to transitions. This is for me. This works for both portals and for screen flow. When you're doing this, right here, home to outside, this is my portal settings. When you're going to B, which is going from here to outside the door, you run the object's action program, instant time change, initialize. What that does is that's where it searches for the time. Okay, global value is at, say, 13, which is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It'll change it to the daytime, to the daytime action right here. It'll disable layer 5 in whichever scene you're at, and go from there. Now the funny part is, what if I have a scene that's not supposed to represent that doesn't show any kind of change in the time of day? How do I make it so that this way this doesn't work? Just don't add in the layers, and this thing will run, and it's not going to do anything. It's not going to find the layers that it needs to disable, and it's not going to disable random layers because you're asking it specifically to find a certain layer, and it's not going to find it, so it's just going to say, oh, I'm just not going to run. So the time of day will still keep going, but as soon as you exit this place that has no time of day change, or at least no visual representation of it, it will change instantly to show what time of day it is. Like you could look out a window and see, oh, it's this time of day. But let's say you go into a cellar where there's no windows or anything, you don't have to put in those extra layers. You can put in the layers that matter for you and go from there. Now, this time of day system, unfortunately, it relies on the fact that you're only going to have a certain amount of layers before it. In this case, I'm only going to have my 4: above, main, tiles, back. If I wanted to add an extra layer, I would have to reconfigure everything else to basically make it like to add one number additionally. So instead of 10 layers in total, I would have 11. which means that morning would start from 5, well, would change from 5 to layer, it would change from layer 5 to layer 6. And then I have to change everything after that. You can find a way around this by placing these objects in every single scene based on the needs of your level. But with the way I have this project set up, where everything is static, I can actually place these objects on the menu scene right here. Instant time change, or no, this was the time of day object and the instant time change. Because I know I'm always going to have the above, main, tiles, and back, those first 4 layers, and then every single layer after that is just going to be the time of day. Those specific 6 layers, I can keep it on my menu scene, and it'll always be working properly. But if you have your game, it's a bit more like each scene is a bit more flexible when it comes to how many layers it has and so on and so forth. In that regard, what you can do is that you can actually set this up to change what the layers are at runtime. So that this way, right here, let me show you this. I'm doing this day instant. If I go to, let's say, scene outside home, and then I put the instant time object or instant time change object here. Let's put it on main. Let's go ahead and resize it. It doesn't really, the size doesn't really matter, but I like going to at least fit into each little piece of the grid. Now, if you look over here in the runtime actions changeable even after placement. Then it says right here, disable layer display, morning. If I were to do that with the other ones, it would be like morning and afternoon, or morning day and then morning day afternoon, etc., based on which one you're doing. So if I were to go over to afternoon, change those as well. Over here, change those as well. When I go back to the scene, I have additional options. So right here, day, I disable morning. Afternoon, I disable morning and day. Dusk, I disable morning, day, and afternoon. So I can actually choose which layers I want, and I can add in like 11 more layers if I wanted to. But then it would only affect the ones that I choose. I want to go ahead and remove this because I don't want to mess these up for my current project. But you see where I'm going with that. If your levels are more flexible, you'll have to place an object in the levels. But that's the way it works. I'm not sure how that would work with portals and ScreenFlow, but yeah, you can basically run the object's action program right here to init, which is initialize. And for ScreenFlow, it's the exact same thing. Add link, go to sequence after changeover, run action program or run objects action program, do the exact same thing. And yes, there is a difference between portals and ScreenFlow. So with ScreenFlow, you're allowed to do a little bit more, like some trickier things because you can use an object to switch out the screen. But yeah, that's just the way that works. Okay. So now that we know how the instant time change works, how to set it up, and basically how to configure it, let's move over to the real meat and potatoes of this whole thing. Time of day object. You can call it whatever you want, but this is what I call it. Obviously, right here in the middle is processing. There's also a little action right here that has no links outside of itself. It's a singular object, which has a shortcut that is linked to from every single time of day. and I'll tell you what that's all about. But first, processing. Nothing. Now, if we're early morning, or if rather, if we're transitioning to early morning, or we're staying at early morning, then we'll go right here. Any condition is met at the time of day equals 5. That's when we're going to early morning. Now, this one's going to be a little bit tricky, but let me actually start with day instead. So it's the same thing, but this one is if the time equals 10, then we process it here. We apply the screen effect to the morning layer, which is layer 5. Why not to the day layer? Or maybe even to the back layer. Here's why. If your back layer is empty, or if you're trying to apply it to a layer that's empty, it's not going to work properly. I know, I tried this. It just didn't work properly. So, okay. So why do we need this extra? Why do we need to apply to the morning layer, not to the day layer or some other layer? Because you're going to disable the morning layer, and you want to show the transition to daytime first. So what it's going to do is it's going to apply. It's going to change over to this color on this layer. And since it's a 4-second completion time, we're going to wait 4 seconds. Then we're going to disable the morning layer. What happens is that you still get your or you get your color transition, but then this is gone. Now you're on day. Then what it does is that it waits for the next hour to come into effect. In this case, when the time equals 11, because that is within the day parameter, goes to wait. Then you're going to delete screen effects. As I said before, they don't stack, which means that if you have a filter effect on the scene and it's currently active, if you try to transition, like if you try to do a duration change to another color, it's not going to work. It's just going to be completely instant. It'll change the color instantly instead of doing a gradual change like it did originally. Again, I looked this over. I actually got Abstract to help me out with this, and yeah, it didn't work the way we wanted it to. So this is why I chose to work with layers instead of just having it work on the background layer, all on one layer. It just doesn't work. So then you basically delete the scene effects. Otherwise, you can't do another day transition, without it being instantaneous. But since the scene that we applied the effect to is disabled, it's not visible anymore, you can safely remove the filter from it and then go back to processing. And this one we can actually do change unconditionally because it already erased it. Then we go back to processing. Okay, so now we needed to go to afternoon. Right here. Time is equal to 15. Now we're going to apply this to layer 6, which is the day layer. Have it hold the runtime. Disable the day layer. So this way early morning and day are now disabled. And so, but of course you're probably thinking also, well, wait a minute. If I'm transitioning and I had already come in from a different scene, aren't the other layers that were on top of that going to be present? So it would only be disabling that one layer? You have to remember the fact that when you did a scene change using either a portal or screen flow, the instant time change object, this one right here, already disabled the previous layers for you. So that when it does the transition to the next hour or to the next time frame, it's just disabling the layer that it needs to, and then it just continues on and on. It just continues disabling layers until you get to nighttime, and then switch over to early morning. So this is what this is the time change object does for you. It fixes that problem. Again, with that 1 hour, or in this case 10 seconds, it'll delete it. It'll delete the effects off of the day scene, and you're good to go. Now, as you might have noticed, I did ask it to wait, like I said, 4 seconds, and then at the wait, it basically deletes the screen effects. Duration should not last the entire hour unless you want it to. If you do, it's gonna be tricky and it might be a little glitchy, but it'll still probably work the way you want it to. But I basically set each hour to be 10 seconds and the duration to be 4 seconds. So this way, it's really nice and gradual when it changes color, but it's much shorter than the actual hour. And since, let's say, the afternoon, is it afternoon to dusk? Yeah, afternoon to dusk. Let me check my hours here. Yeah, afternoon lasts 2 hours. Basically, as soon as it gets to 17, it changes to dusk. So it's basically afternoon is 15 and 16. Then at 17, it changes to dusk. And then at 17, 18 for dusk. So it lasts basically 20 seconds. So you've got 4 seconds to wait between 20 seconds. Even if you had it wait for 10 seconds, you still have an extra 10 seconds for that 1 hour. Or for that extra hour. If you're doing a simple day to night transition, you don't really have to worry about that too much because you're going to be having a lot of hours in between. Again, unless you're doing like each hour is 1 second or even like half a second or something, but you don't want to do that. That's way too fast. But maybe that's what you're after. Who knows? Either way, the wait or the wait time during the after the transition allows you some time to do all this extra processing. So here's the difference right here. You're disabling layers. When you get to night, you disable the final layer, or the second to final layer, which is layer 9. But then there's the nighttime layer, which is the final layer, layer 10. But you don't disable it when you go to early morning. Here's what you do. You still apply the screen effect to show it's going to early morning. Then you wait the duration. Now here is where here's where the difference lies. You're going to enable layer display, and you're going to say enable layer or select layer to enable. You click on 10, which is the final layer, but then you click this enable unselected layer. So it basically enables everything but 10 because 10 is already enabled. It's already showing. So it basically goes right back to showing layer 5, which is the morning layer. So this way, yeah, and then right here, it goes right back to wait, and it deletes the screen effect from layer 10. And so the cycle goes. Again, you can put however many times of day you want. If you want, you can just do day and night. That would be much simpler. But the process is the same. And you do have to have 2 different layers to work with. Unless you're doing instantaneous changes, the old system that I had in place can work better. It's a lot simpler. It's a lot easier. But I will post that another time. But that's basically the way this system works. I know it's probably a little bit more complicated than I made it sound in the first video, but the first video was flawed because I didn't actually explain how all of this worked. This is why the extra time is being taken to explain how everything works. I want you to be able to actually be able. I want you to be able to actually construct this and know what everything does and the way this works. So now that you have this information, now you should be able to viably create the proper working version of this system. So again, you can tweak it, you can change it, you can change the duration of hours, you can change the duration of how the transitions. It can either be instantaneous, it can last almost the entire amount of time during the transition. You can basically do a whole bunch of different things with this. But the core of it is these three items. And again, with the day to night clock or day night clock, you don't have to have it showing an actual number, but I do because that's what I want. I want the player to be able to see what time it is. I might later on show how to show a AM PM clock, but keep this the same, but just have an extra object showing AM to PM. But that'll be another time. Either way, I hope that you were able to find this tutorial, this guide on how to do a day to night system in Pixel Game Maker. I hope you found it to actually help you. I hope that you were able to get something out of this because honestly, this is a pretty good system, and I developed it on my own. I thought about how I wanted to execute it, and I went from there. So if you need help with it, please don't hesitate to leave a comment or ask me questions on the unofficial Discord for Pixel Game Maker MV. You can just do @Jesse. You can check out my Twitter handle as well. It's in the description. But yeah, you can also like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. I'm definitely gonna be putting out more stuff. And when my connection gets better, like when I get a fiber connection or something, I'm gonna be streaming. Streaming actually how to do all this stuff in real time and just, game development. But for the time being, I'm gonna end this video here. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.